That's like the big message that I don't talk about, that I want people to get, is the power of owning of intellectual property. We've seen more platforms in the publicly traded, in the public space of media. We've seen more platforms get created than original series, because the series ownership, the people who own those series, are able to take those franchises and move them from platform to platform.
I've got your back. Those are good words to hear, aren't they? Knowing that when you're struggling, when you feel alone in the battle, when you have questions, someone is going to step up to the plate to help. And in this mad world of content creation, especially in the digital age, a little help may be just what you need. So if you have found Hilistically Speaking to be that for you, I would love if you can consider leaving a rating and a review wherever your headphones are taking you, wherever you're tuning in, so that I can do right by you and continue to find topics and guests that touch, move, and inspire you. And I am even going to take a brave and bold step here, take it one step further because of the topic we're covering, and let you know that I am looking for sponsorship. I'm looking for new sponsors. So let me know if you would love to have a conversation with me to see how we can support each other in holistic healing, in holistic health, and yes, in humor. So reach out, let's have that conversation and see if we align. Now, you know that this show is all about traumas to triumphs. And the one thing I've noticed is coming up a lot in the podcast world, in media in general, really, is the overwhelm of building your brand, owning your brand, and still having time to be your authentic self in the process, to share what you really want to share, without getting tossed in the waves or in the undertow with too much information. And by the way, is that information even right? So while I was sitting here in the silence and really thinking about this, I was thinking about how can I support you on this journey? And one person came to mind, Vinnie Potestivo. Vinnie is not only an Emmy Award-Winning Media Advisor who has launched the careers of a lot of big names that you're going to hear about in this conversation. He helps grow personal brands and founder-led companies. But more than anything, he is an advocate for independent creators. He wants you to win. And during our conversation, Vinnie not only opened up about his own traumas to triumphs, he also shares his personal branding box to help you take your podcast and your brand and your gift to the next level. Including, we cover the power of intellectual property, discoverability, and getting your name out there. And if that scares you, good. Sponsorships and partnerships, I know you're looking at those. And 3 crucial factors to monetize your brand because you're worth it. It's time to get over the fear and put that imposter syndrome aside and get some hardcore Vinspiration. Vinnie, you're one of my favorite people. This is the most exciting podcast I could possibly do. I'm just so excited to have you here. I'm so excited to be back in the room with you, right? But
yes.
just you're seriously one of my favorite people, and you have so much knowledge. You give so much of yourself and your knowledge away, and I cannot be more elated to have you on Hilistically Speaking, sharing who you are, sharing just everything that makes up VPE.
Thank you. I have this Kelly Clarkson song, A Moment Like This. Some people, I have this like strong soundtrack happening in my head right now, by the way. I love, for a lifetime. It feels like a lifetime coming by. I talk about orbits quite a lot because I do believe in understanding a cycle and a rhythm. It helps me understand my space in this world far easier when I just accept the smallness that we are and the greatness that we have. But to get to watch you grow and this podcast to grow and us on LinkedIn together. And it's just been, it's a good vibes, good outbound, great output. Yeah.
I agree. And it's that whole idea of let your vibe attract your tribe kind of thing. And your tribe is one person at a time. And knowing you for a number of years and just seeing where you've gone in your career. I mean, you're somebody who has so many years in the media and has seen the media change from this traditional media that we see, the old school media, into this modern digital age, and you've gone with it. And from somebody who has really helped build the careers of so many of the big names out there. But also it goes back to the humbleness of you building your own career and seeing where it's taking you, because we all have our own story, right? We really do. Yeah. So having you here to be able to share your knowledge, your expertise, and really, I find like in this day and age of like coaching and people who are providing value in their expertise. I'm scared to do the quotes, but I don't have that updated Apple thing that we were talking about before. I'm on like the Fisher-Price
that
Apple.
Update's got balloons popping up and confetti and fireworks going on.
Not on
like
this
a
girl.
Katy Perry video, and it's just like a normal interview.
Which is kind of cool. But my whole point is that
shout out to Katy.
Right. I love Katy Perry.
Yeah,
She's
right?
like so inspirational. But the whole idea is that you give so much of who you are and what you've learned in the business. And it just says so much about who you are, the testament to the person you are. And I want to really touch on that, because I actually reached out to a number of people. I put it out there like, hey, I'm talking podcasts. I'm talking building your brand. I've got Vinnie on the show. What are your questions? And I got to say, a lot of people came back with the same questions that continuously come up in this industry, especially as independent creators, whether you're a podcaster or building your brand. And I want to get to those questions first. But my main thing for you is knowing that Holistically Speaking is that trauma to triumph through holistic health, healing, and humor. How has it been for you building your own career? Somebody who worked with them at MTV for so many years, helped build so many brands and individuals and make them who they are. How has it been for your own emotional well-being?
Healing.
Elaborate on
Healing,
that.
to be honest. And I want to start by going back and saying, I think I give so much of myself back to this industry in a weird way because I found myself in this industry. What a toxic, weird, and unconventional way to do it, by the way. So I am not asking people to pick up on exterior, reactions and exterior compliments to help you. That's not how I found myself. Finding the value of myself in the room with some of the greatest, most creative people in the world. I mean, that at a point in time where I was so young that I didn't know imposter syndrome even existed yet. Before the internet, and what I didn't know. So I give so much back to this industry we're in. It helped me be creative. It helped me communicate. It helped me certainly be uniquely who I am. And I'm honored 30 years later, because I got my start in TV in 1993 as a community volunteer producer at the Staten Island Community Television Network, by the way.
Love it.
Digitizing video. Yeah. I learned how to take tape and put it on a computer. So I learned, like you're saying, this traditional to modern sort of this intersection that we're in, this convergence that we're in of media. I kind of have always been, I would always say, like, I have this beach analogy where, like, I'm a surfer, I ride the waves. I'm not a swimmer out by the sharks. I'm not even a surfer. I'm more of a boogie boarder, just to be very clear. The Jersey Shore, there's not a lot of surfing going on, but the boogie boarding is real great. And I think that helped me tap into some unique skill sets that I had, or organizing creativity, implementing creativity, processing creativity. Those were like soft and hard skill sets that I had. And when MTV was ready to hire a talent development assistant and create the talent development department and what that looked like, I had the technical skills that were needed to help creatives be creative. And I learned the rest of what I do by being at 1515 Broadway from Sharon Osbourne and Ashley Simpson and Jess Simpson and Ashton Kutcher and Mandy Moore and Beyonce, like surrounded by powerful creators who knew to create content, to own content, and to get it in front of an audience meant that they can take that content and bring it with them. And that journey has always been an important one to me.
And that journey coming with so many ups and downs and the imposter syndrome and the self-doubt that can come in with that, did you ever sit there thinking, what the heck am I doing here? Do I even belong here?
You know what? People ask me that question like when I was like 30 or 35. They're like, well, like, Vinnie, what like made you, like the right person for that back then? I was like, like it was my job kind of was my answer. Like, I never really, to be really honest, I didn't. How will I say? I have gone through a lot as a young child with parents who made decisions for me that affected my children. I said almost, and that's an interesting slip. But my brothers and my sister, and I felt like I turned some of those traumas into my superpowers. How do I get to MTV and do what I do? I have to put everybody before me to be in casting. I have to really, truly champion so many people before I can even get into the room for me to feel valuable in that room. And in casting, what an awesome skill set to have, because in casting, I got people cast. Whereas sometimes in casting, you get more people uncast and not the project than you. But I didn't focus on the transaction of that casting either. I always put people before my goals and before profit. I wanted friends. I wanted creative people that had output, that were communicating in a unique style, because that's how I did it as a kid. That's how
I totally align with that. I can see that, because I too was that kid that I felt like decisions were sometimes made for me, being the baby of the family. And I cannot stand when people are like, well, we thought you had too much going on, or I'm like, let me make that choice. But it also goes back to the idea of like being on both sides of the casting table, where I've walked into auditions, whether it was for a host job or acting gig or whatnot, thinking, I just want to be the best in the room so that they have an easier time making the decision, right? Yeah. Like, I'm here to say, I'm here. Not you're welcome in a conceited way, but you're welcome. I did my best. Yeah. And if this is who you need, I'm here. And then on the other side, it's like you're seeing hundreds of thousands of people for some gig, some program, whatever it is, to know you can just sit there and be like, we found our person. We're done. Yeah, we're done. Let's break for lunch. So I think that I can feel that where you just want to do well, and you want people to do well as well. You want a good tribe around you, right?
Yeah. By the way, I would actually end the project with like, we found our people. Oh, I can't believe I'm going to have to lose one of them to this project, but I cannot wait for the next one, because I have like a pocket full. Because that's how I got my start at MTV. I knew people that I could bring to the opportunity. And by the way, I was told as a kid that I didn't have talent from someone that I really trusted. So I kind of, we weren't in the industry. We don't have family, and we didn't know anybody in TV. I didn't even really want to be in TV. I wanted to be a Broadway producer, by the way. So MTV being in Times Square has a lot to do with how I landed at MTV. But I was told I would have to randomly meet a casting director on some rando street in Times Square, and the stars would need to align for me to ever get my break. In my own weird way, I created a spreadsheet. I asked people if they wanted to get casting information. I started looking out for them, sending them casting information. And then one day I saw this notice that says, casting director on 45th and Broadway in the middle of Times Square. We're going to shoot for MTV. Come prepared to be on camera. And at the end, I said, hey, I've got a database full of talent. If you ever need, people in the tri-state area to be here, music videos, or please, reach out to me and let me know. And they turned around immediately and said, we're shooting a very Busta Christmas special tomorrow. Could you get 30 people to sit around? He's going to sit on a throne and read his version of Christmas rhymes. So being prepared for me has always come in the form of what I do for other people. It's even how my podcast got launched. So it's how I show up best.
That says so much about who you are as like an empath and being so altruistic, is that what you just said a second after the whole casting conversation of you're wanting everyone to win. And living in a world where we think that life is abundant, there's space for all of us to win. And I think you and I both know in this business, there's a lot of times when you're sitting in that casting office and you see other actors or other talents sitting around you, and the ones who aren't so secure with who they are coming from a lack of abundance. The insecurities step in. Oh, wow, they're here, those kind of things. And I remember feeling that vibe sometimes, but it's like, you really want everyone to win, and we're here for each other. And I think if more people are like that, and if we see more people on the other side of the casting table like that, then we all win. So that says something about you, that you really approach things that way, which even goes to what you're sharing in this day and age, with I have a podcast, which I love the name of that. You can't be any more obvious, right? Which is, I
did do the Osbournes, the Housewives of New Jersey, the Ashley Simpson show. Like, it is what it is, y'all.
Right. Why are we making it more complicated?
But what I'm not going to do is call it something that you're going to think it's called, so that you don't know exactly what you're watching. So I want you to trust when you dial in that who you're watching, not necessarily what will change, but whose will move fast and change slowly. So expect that.
It makes perfect sense. So with the I have a podcast, you're interviewing or having conversation. I prefer that term. You're having conversations with these incredible creators, many of which we know, but even those who are lesser known, that are just looking to build their brands, So what is your biggest, what is the thing you really want the takeaway from I Have a Podcast to truly be?
Oh, that's a great question. I'll selfishly answer it, by the way. I want the takeaway to be that I created something, and you nailed it when you said, I prefer interview, not podcast. I don't sit down and record a podcast episode. Oprah doesn't sit down and record a TV special. She sits down and records the interview, and that interview gets broken up into 15 different iterations of content that hit very, very many amounts of media platforms that are out there. What I want people to know is the power of IP. Truly, what I wish the message is, and why I call it I Have a Podcast, and I spent a couple of $100 and got it registered. So I own I Have a Podcast, a phrase that I've heard so many people tell me that they want to do, that they stand up with such pride when they can say, oh, I have a podcast. Like, when even listeners have a favorite podcast they listen to, there's this ownership of that content, and listeners, your audience says, I have a podcast. It's Hilistically Speaking. It's like my favorite it's mine. I come from a world in TV where they called my hits guilty pleasures. It hurts the ego just a ton. Oh my gosh, I love that show. I can't watch it in public or talk about it, but it's my guilty pleasure. I'm like, but you watch every episode. You watch 50 repeats of the same episode is more than a guilty pleasure. Good day, sir. But that's what I really want. That's like the big message that I don't talk about, that I want people to get, is the power of owning of intellectual property. We've seen more platforms in the publicly traded, in the public space of media. We've seen more platforms get created than original series, because the series ownership, the people who own those series, are able to take those franchises and move them from platform to platform. I know now many of us are watching The Office on Netflix, but didn't watch it on the original TV network, that it aired on. That's the benefit of owning the content. Right now, what we're seeing in the big screen of television, let's call it like the Apple top 50, the Hulu's and some premium streamers, a couple of OTT networks that are making it. Those are platforms that are still buying original content from television. When you get to the OTTs, which are over, OTT networks are over the top, and usually they're advertising driven networks where they're licensing content that they didn't create, and you can watch it for free because there's commercials, there's advertising on it. You own your content, you have the ability to be distributed on those platforms. And that's powerful when you think of how people move catalogs of content, whether it's movies that we know of, like Star Wars. You sell franchises. You don't sell the stories. You sell the source. And that's something that I get powerful about IP. That's something that we can own. That's something that Sharon Osbourne and Ashton Kutcher and Jess Simpson back then didn't have, which is ownership over their content. The Osbournes just launched their podcast this year. There's so many more is in podcasting. Sujin Pak is in. They're owning their content that is out there, and you just can do so much more with it. That's what I really want people to get is the power of IP. What we talk about career and brand development, and there's a creative lens. You know, I was at MTV when the audience, as a gatekeeper to the youth culture audience, let's put it that way, because that's how television and media was set up. So what we talk about is talent and brand development. I just sat down with Matthew Knowles. We talked literally, by the way, it's such a cool interview. We talk about the drills that Destiny's Child would do to prepare for failures. Like, you know, Beyonce has such an awesome reputation for, like, she always nails the song. There's always a wardrobe malfunction. She doesn't get off the horse. Something goes wrong. There's this internet fear of, oh, someone's getting fired. Beyonce's going to give. She worked hard to be able to plan for that failure. She worked hard to be able to have that impeccable performer experience that you get from her. And that's like understanding the no's. You know, I saw the no's. We see the no's off camera. Everyone else sees the yeses. So when I sat down with Mandy Moore, it was talking about the films she didn't do and why she finally said yes to Disney to do Princess Diaries, and then why she finally did A Walk to Remember, and even creating an original character, you know, on This Is Us. Like what that whole process is about, right? You know, what that whole process is about. It's fascinating to me. And I love, by the way, my favorite question I ask is always like, what does it feel like to own a business and an album? Because like, I just think that because we own creative properties and we sometimes don't treat our creative properties the same way we treat our businesses, yet we want financial gain or we're monetizing our content, but we still don't treat the two the same. Most artists will say it feels very similar. They're identical. Their marketing meeting for how to sell merch is the same as how to sell a business. About, for Christina Milian, it was about beignets, for example. But it was fascinating to hear the business acumen, the business mind of monetizing content, especially now that they own it. That's cool. It's powerful.
And seeing how smart creators are. You know, you're not just looking at a musician who's totally just creating music. There is a business mindset to so many people who are performers, creators, that they don't get enough credit. They think that, yes, you have people, you have your posse, you have your entourage. Thank goodness for that. As we've learned from books like Think and Grow Rich, the Napoleon Hill philosophy, like you need your people that might be wiser in a certain area so that you can focus on what your wise and your gifts are. But that doesn't mean you don't have any acumen in business, right? So there's something to be said when you see, wow, that person really operates their dynasty really well. Like there is just something about them where you know that they have a business sense, but let me focus on my gift and my creative craft, but I still am going to just keep a watchful eye. In this modern world, while you want to trust the people who have a craft and a skill in an area, a gift, it doesn't hurt for you to have an idea of what it's about. Because if you're completely removed from that part of your business, then you're how are you even a part of your business? Right? Yeah. You're kind of just the monkey in the middle in a way.
That's almost like I think that to me is exactly what talent development is an ongoing refinement and process of figuring out how to take these special skills, unique, fascinating tool sets that you have and just plugging them into it. So I do believe that you can overwhelm people when you have too many skill sets. I'm for certainly one of them. The trick is picking a media platform, not a content type, but a media platform. People who know artists in people who are following artists on television aren't necessarily following them on social media. The people who are listening to podcasts aren't necessarily following us on blogs. Those are separate media mediums. And this is where, by being known for one thing and one thing strongly by a categorical leader, even in a niche audience, this to me is what niching down. I hate this word niching down because people make themselves smaller. It breaks my heart. I'm like, sing, baby June, sing.
Sing out, Louise.
Yeah. Sing out, Louise. Yeah. Turn on your hearing aids too. But like be loud, we don't need to find ourselves. You need to be yourselves. You need to find ways to be yourself. Mm. But acceptance, it's a little easier said once you have the self-confidence and the ability to look back and see the hilarity of our life and move on from that, grow from that. And
there is so much growth that we can do. We're never done learning. I always say you're a work in progress, right? And the minute we start learning something else, something new comes out, like ChatGPT, we're always in the overwhelm if we're not too careful. And before we go any further, I just want to remind folks, Vinnie is sharing a lot of really wonderful content here. We haven't even gotten to some of the questions, but if you're touched, moved, and inspired by this podcast, this episode on Hilistically Speaking, definitely pass it along. Share it with somebody else who's a creator, who is looking to build their brand. Let them know about it. Check out I Have a Podcast. I have a podcast. So does Vinnie, right? And just check that out. I'm going to put that all in the listen notes so that you have a way to check in, find what you need to find. The free growth kit that we're going to talk about a little bit. You offer such content for people to walk away from with all your experiences and your learning that you continue to do as well.
Yeah.
So that's something I want to touch on. And I want to go to the monetization of podcasts, because you did mention that a little bit. And we had so many questions come in about this when I said I was talking about this topic. And that's an overwhelm for people. I think as people are building their brand, learning how to monetize, people will say two things. I don't know how to get sponsors. I don't know how to monetize. Where do I start? Go, Vinnie.
Well, I would say that what I do now is what I learned in television. I don't learn to monetize my content. I learn how to monetize my brand, and I figure out how to make content that allows me to execute on my brand values, my brand goals, my brand messaging. Right? Like television networks have something called an upfront. And what they do is they go around to the brands that are going to pay that money, and they share their intentions. They share their creative ideas. They give them a taste of what's to come. Sometimes that taste is not received so well, and those shows end up not being on the slate because it's all about the advertiser, all about the buyer in television. And the other hard lesson that I learned in TV was like, without a great audience, there is no great show. And that's like the hardest part of being creative, is like, even if it's the best show idea ever, if there's no platform or audience or media congregate that's going to be able to support that, whether it's usually by advertisers who are looking to group together people in a demographic, it's really hard to make content. And then the third thing I'll say is, when you make content for demographics, the sad part is that changes. When I worked at MTV, we were 12 to 24. Now they're clearly 18 to 24 plus, by the way. If I created the content in mind for what MTV is today, back then, I don't think we would have the Mandy Moore brand that we have now. I got, this is the coolest thing ever. I got shows that are in like the first page of Netflix right now. The Hills and Laguna Beach, and shows that I cast 25 years ago that are finally on Netflix. So if you want to know how to get, your Netflix credit, do some good work. Don't worry about the demographic. Do you know why? Because Netflix is now tapping into that demographic. The same way MTV tapped into the Friends demographic maybe 7 years ago and introduced Friends to the Gen Z audience. There's a whole audience of people that think MTV created Friends. Like, this is brilliant. They don't even know that Justin Timberlake was in NSYNC, by the way. They don't even know NSYNC. They're like the guy from the Troll movies. So,
the guy from SNL skits.
Yeah, right. Yeah. The hot dog guy. Yeah. Like, so all of that disappointment and failure and setup for success, because that's been the journey. Creating content that I can make is always the content I make first, not the content I feel I should make. The content I feel I should make, to me, is a reaction of something I'm seeing. And I appreciate conversations, and I am happy to jump into a comment. But I don't want to spend a lot of time thinking about how I can support a conversation. I want to get ahead of the issue. I want to come in with to be honest, usually a better question. Like sometimes we get stuck in the combo because the answers only get us to this, atmosphere, and we need open-ended questions that allow us to get us to the stratosphere and break through barriers and even a small, even those microaggressions that unfortunately we all have. And I came from a very small little tiny island called Staten Island. I thought there were a lot more Vinnies in New York. My cousin Vinnie, I thought I was really coming into this world full of Vinnies. I don't know if anyone else knows many Vinnies other than me. So it's an honor to be your Vinspiration. I hope you're Vinspired. I got a whole bunch of Vin puns. The Vinput is great.
You're so my people. I live on wordplay.
Oh
I love it. I love it.
It's easy to remember, and it's fun to share.
It is fun to share, and it's a fun way to share, especially in the overwhelm. Like we need ways to see the humor. Going back to the humor in the healing, even because it's healing constantly to learn who we are and how we want to show up in this world, and the what you're sharing about with conversations, especially the open-ended questions, and the journalist head in me is always spinning in that area. It's being the active listener. Being the person, and even as a mental health professional, it's like listening to people means being an active listener, thinking about not what you're going to ask next, but listen to what's being said, because a totally different question can come out of what was just shared. And there are a lot of people that are just hearing in this world and not listening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh, I got chills a little bit because I was in therapy and Al-Anon and Alateen. I had addictive parents. So I was always very aware of sharing information and being surrounded by therapists and really being mindful of the questions that they asked, because I knew that they were going someplace. And I knew that depending how I answered the questions, that something was going to change and I was going to have to do something. So I just became really mindful of the questions that they were asking. And that always impacted my answers because it was more of a game of protection for me back then. And I took that experience into casting with me. And when we developed like the unscripted reality genre of television that we came into, I would find myself constantly saying, I'm not a therapist and I cannot offer advice, but I was also very mindful of the questions I ask are going to have not just answers in the room, but a reaction outside of the room. I had to be really mindful of how I phrase certain questions, because in television, they want to get all the action, after casting, not during casting. There's even this one show I cast for Lifetime, and it was called basically like parents who weren't sure if they wanted to have a child, or one of the two people in the relationship changed their mind, and now it was a potential possibility. And through the love of the neighborhood and some families that want people to feel like what it was like for a family to, they volunteer their newborn, their infant, their toddler, and then their senior. So they experience like what it's like to have a child. And maybe 3 out of the 5 families that were approved by network ended up having a child before we went into production. And I was like, I asked some good questions, but maybe they were too good. But like those questions that we ask, they're more than just answers come from them. Action comes from them. The platforms that win, like when I was at MTV, are the ones that prepare and predict how to support the conversations, the community, that entire conversation that they're starting by these platforms. And
absolutely,
that's where the real win is.
Yeah,
so
and it gets.
Thanks for that share, by the way.
Of course. Well, thank you for being so open and vulnerable.
Trauma to superpowers.
Right, and but that's what it's about. It's like the takeaway. I say this all the time. Like when I'm working with people, sometimes I'm going to mirror back at you what you don't see in yourself in the moment, and then you walk away with a If somebody walks away with a after talking to me, I've done something right. Rather than it just being like, talk, answer. There's got to be an expansion outside of the conversation. Like you said, you want to leave people with something so that there is that moment or aha moment, right? Because it's bigger than we are, right? So
it's my favorite part in the movie. So if I can do that in real life with people and be in the room, just if I'm the person that happens to be that guy that instigates that, then I'm cool. I'm getting itchy even thinking about I can take credit for such. But I a little bit, I have to step into my power here. A little bit I can, because I'm very mindful of my ability to create passion and power and attach that to a project and get it greenlit. So whether that's our personal projects or creative projects. So I'm very mindful of that. But that's multiplicative. Yeah. It's, it's the alchemy. It's alchemy. It's alchemy. I love it all.
Oh, that's a good SAT word right there.
Yeah, right. From a guy named Potestivo, you're going to get a couple of words with some extra syllables.
I love it. I love it. From one Italian to another, I totally get it.
Yeah.
So
it's multiplicative over there.
Hey.
We ain't multiplying. We're multiplicative.
Well, I appreciate you being so open. I mean, I think vulnerability is courage. We've heard that before. Being able to be open and vulnerable, and in this day and age, in the digital age especially, people are just like sharing their stories. It's so much stuff. There has to be a pain point. We have to have something that people are needing from us, right? But it's also while somebody's needing something from me or you, we're also getting something. I say this all the time, and I know that anyone that listens to this podcast knows that I say this a lot. It's everyone that comes on this show is a masterclass for me. I'm not just having people on the show to be a guest and fill a guest role. I'm learning something. I want to walk away with something, and I want that to, if it's going to impact me, I know it's going to impact the greater good. Right? Because these people are tuning in. And I'm sure you have that with, I have a podcast too. And just everything you're doing, life is abundant, so we need to be able to give, because when we give, we receive,
Yeah. Well, I plan on it. I plan on giving. And I think that's why I have a website where I give away so much information so I can support all the stories and strategies that I give so freely. I wouldn't give them freely if I didn't have the support for them that I could provide you with on an ongoing basis. Like that was important for me in a leadership position, from an authority building position. I felt like that support system is more important than starting the message.
Yeah. And you do give away so much. The Creative Hub, we're going to share that in the podcast listen notes, because this is I'm still downloading PDF files. But can we talk a little bit about, I know you brought this up to me a while ago, the IMDb, and how that can really be powerful for podcasting. This is huge.
Yeah. And this is also here in the Creator Hub. Even, by the way, even monetization, I realize that people realize that they don't know that there's a monetization platform called Influencer Marketing Indexes, where creators like us, anyone who makes content, so that's how I'm identifying as a creator. That can be a podcaster, it can be a CEO, a CMO, a founder, a person at a company, anyone who's creating content to communicate on a creative platform are creators. So there are creator marketing indexes where the big brands are actually looking for the small people like us for two reasons. One, our audiences have a much higher level of trust with a smaller group of people. It's data that's been proven, because usually there's a direct relationship. We know you in real life and also digitally, and have been, growing a long time, versus some of the celebrities that just have inflated numbers or an awareness of the brand, but not an actual affinity of the brand. That's so funny. If you're listening to the podcast, there's the balloon effect has struck again.
I wonder if that's going to come up on the video. I don't even know, but if it does, it'll be the first balloons. Oh, that's awesome! Yay. Amazing!
Yay! Then I'm gonna throw up my confetti vibes for you too, and give you the full piece. What I realized though, and why I think I have so many, I don't want to call them tricks, but there's so much information I share, is I've maybe worked for 20 networks for 25, 30 years that were the only clients I had, because those were the only people buying content. And then some networks being on LinkedIn was important. Some networks being on Twitter was important. Some networks being relevant to the executives' children were important. And I realized all along the way what were ways to make people stand out. IMDb is one of the places where creators and professionals in the creative industry go to be part of crew, to find out who a hiring manager is. If you don't know what IMDb is, it's the Internet Movie Database. You've probably gone there to see what your favorite actor is or other movies they've been in. By being a podcaster, I own intellectual property, and that intellectual property is an approved form of content that Amazon, which owns IMDb, recognizes as intellectual property. And it allows us to digitize some credits to take some real life actions that we're taking in real life and turn into data that Google and Yahoo and Bing and all these other platforms will search and identify and see you as an executive producer, a host. By the way, get discovered for the guests that are on your podcast. List your awards that are on your podcast. And the benefit is it's owned by Amazon. It has a high domain authority, which means Google really trusts it. And it gives us the ability to stand out at a much higher volume than even if we were to say it in a thank you note or in a blog post or maybe in a social media post or something like that. I also just love credits for networking. Yeah. You own the ability to share those credits. So anyone who's helping you with your podcast, give them a special thanks.
Always.
That brings them in. You'll never forget the first person who brought you onto IMDb. I never forgot my first show. I know the Tom Green show. So I'll never forget my first TV credit that got me on IMDb. Be that person because you don't forget your first. Mm-hmm. And also know that it's indexed by Google. It's a way to sort of to in an evergreen way connect yourself with expertise to somebody, and that connection is searchable, and that leads to visibility, and that leads to more opportunity and discoverability and more sharing and more creation of opportunities. And all of that just from being on IMDb. You have a right to be there. Right. Take it. It's yours.
And there's a free level of IMDb, and then there's the pro, which pro is better. I think IMDb has changed a lot over the years. I actually took a hiatus from it because, I've been in television for a long time and film. Yeah. And I'm realizing now, I'm like, this is really a good place. I was using it a lot to find guests. Like my brother is an executive television producer of reality TV. Mm-hmm. And he'd be like, use that to find the person if you want that person on your podcast. And I'm like, oh, I can find the press agent. You can find so much on there as your own library resource, in addition to somebody discovering you. So it takes a little time to build, like add all your episodes, right? Because that would be part of what you're doing is adding all your episodes. Worth it. Yeah.
You have to create the data framework for intellectual property. So first you say there's a podcast and you give what that title is. Then you say there's a structure of an episode. And then you say, here is what the episode is about. I'll add videos and photos because all those videos and photos show up in Google search because of the high domain recommendation. And then in the creation of that episode, I attach my celebrity guest or my guest. If my guest has been in multiple episodes, it actually increases their visibility on my platform and I have more visibility on their platform. And like Hil, like you just said, TV bookers have been using this for years. Mm-hmm. If you're an expert and you want to be booked in the mental health space, I promise you right now, podcasters look at the Today Show and GMA and some of the places, Oprah and Dr. Phil, some of the places where experts have spoken before. And we literally use it as a casting list. Trust me, I know. I'm very sensitive about that.
I love knowing this.
A lot of people steal my casting because I don't own people. I own that opportunity, which is why I never focused on one person. I'm not a manager and I'm not in business with you. I'm just one person who's going to help you get to the next level. And if I can do it with finesse and a little bit of levity, so you appreciate the process because it's turbulent going from atmosphere to stratosphere, and that process goes well for you, then you'll keep me in your orbit as you continue to grow. And when you reach for the stars, you impact the planets and everything else around you. So like I really talk about the universe. I have to believe how small we are and how abundant opportunity there is.
We're a speck in this.
Y'all, imagine looking back even 100 years from now and they're going to be like, they call it a tweet on Twitter. Like I don't understand. They don't even call it
that anymore.
Yeah, right. They're like, what is that? What is that thing they went through for 20 years that everyone on the planet knew, but no one talks about it anymore?
I did this program.
We're all doing this together.
We are doing it together. And that reminds me, I did a program years ago, and I'm sure you heard of it because we talk a lot about the universe and how it all means nothing. But we give so much emphasis to things and we put so much pressure on ourselves, right? But years ago, I did the Landmark Forum, right? I don't know if you ever did. You've got to be a Landmarkian. Okay.
That's how
I knew that you were talking about the speck in the universe, and I'm sitting here going,
This is how it started.
Yes.
This is literally why I ended up doing what I'm doing.
I get it. And it was my brother and my mom who took it before, when it used to be Est, right? It was Est way back in the day, a little wackadoodle. And I remember when I did the Landmark, and I did it in New York City down on 8th Avenue, and I was still living in North Carolina at the time, but I came here to do it. I have no idea what pulled me here to do it. But my brother said on the day in between, he's like, go to Hayden Planetarium, and I want you to go do one of the shows and watch and just see how small you are in the grand scheme of things in the universe. And I did that.
Before you write your letter to mom.
Right. And before you come back and invite 20 people to come to the free seminar. But I remember doing that thinking, wow, I am really small in this grand scheme of things.
Yeah.
And my problems are small and they mean something, but really they mean nothing, as we learned, right? Everything's a racket. But it's that whole idea of we put so much emphasis on things. And if we just spend more time being human beings rather than human doings, we would get so much further, you know?
Oh, yeah. And human waitings.
Yeah. Like hurry up and wait game, which is so big in the creative world, right?
By the way, when my mom moved to New York, she thought they were so rude because the sign said no standing. And she didn't even know that cars... Yeah, she's like, they don't even let you stand. Like, they just make you walk on the sidewalks. This is where I get my special skill set also. Hi, Mom.
Hi,
love
Mom.
you.
Shout out to
Big
Mom.
episode for us, Mom. Big episode. A lot of blame, a lot of credit, by the way.
A lot of healing.
I wouldn't be anywhere. A lot of healing. I wouldn't be anywhere if it weren't for my functionally dysfunctional relationship with my mom. That helped me connect with Sharon Osbourne, with Jessica Simpson's mom, with Beyonce's mom. I mean, I'm such... with the women of the Housewives of New Jersey, like that relationship for me, empowering female business owners. When I look at what I did on Bravo or any of the networks that I've worked on, it's really a big secret sauce to how I've been able to share stories is again, the traumas that turned into those superpowers.
Absolutely. And no family is perfect. And what the heck is perfect? We're perfectly imperfect. And honestly, I always say my family put the fun in dysfunction. The F-U-N. Like, we all have stuff. And if we're just going to ignore it and sweep it under the rug and say everything's fine, you know, without throwing anyone under the bus, without doing anything that's with the intent of hurting someone, we have to learn and grow from our own upsets. I mean, I have them, you have them, everyone else out there has something, whether you've identified it with it yet or not. It's just be open to the possibility that you're exactly where you are because of where you've come from. Just how do you want to walk? How do you want to walk home? Basically, what is it? The saying that we're all just walking each other home, right? So I love that you share that. I love that you're so vulnerable to share that on this show. It means so much to me, and I imagine it'll mean a lot to those who are listening. It's a takeaway for me too, Vinnie. So we've talked about sponsorship. We've talked about monetization. We've talked about building the brand, IMDb, which is such a great source. And you mentioned one thing about being the source of the story. Oh, see, I don't get the quote things. Damn it. I don't get there we go. You can do it for me.
Confetti.
Yeah,
oh, balloons.
Okay, little balloons for those who are just listening. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll see the balloons.
Balloon.
What is this? What do you mean by the source of the story?
Oh, yeah, right. So in the story economy, where there are, where content is king and it's all about storytelling. I think a lot of us, by the way, one of the things I learned at Landmark Forum was the power of the source. We had the ability to change the story. When I figured that out, that something happened in college that I wasn't happy about, and I wanted to find a way to just sort of build my own path. I went to Landmark Forum, by the way, because I didn't like all the things that had happened to me. And that was really becoming how I identified who I was or who I wasn't based on the things that had happened to me. And I was basically a result of success predicated on things against me, as opposed to the result of actual success mile markers that made me there. It was Robin Quivers who was in my class who told me, well, if you're really good with like databases, then like take Backstage Magazine and ask people if, create a talent agency, put out an ad and say, I'm looking to create, an opportunity to send information to you. And if you want to build your career, and if I want to build my Rolodex and that sounds good to you, send me your headshot. And I had 700 headshots sent to me at Wagner College, by the way, and in September. And then by November, it was my first day working during Spanking New Music Week at MTV, but it was that action that I had to take. I didn't even, again, imposter syndrome wasn't something I was aware of yet. God bless the ego. So I didn't even think, well, like, do they think I'm a real casting director? Because it says Student Box 577, One Campus Road, Wagner College. Like, I wasn't trying to be anything I wasn't. I just truly wanted to help people. And because those people who truly wanted to help me in my time of need were the people that stood out to me. So if I could in a weird, unique way do that creatively, then it felt like that was a measurement of success that I was comfortable with, and that was the goal.
That resonates with me so much. Just hearing you talk about it, you're coming from such an empathic place of wanting to help others. It just comes through you, Vinnie. It's just being around that kind of energy is just so important, you know? And
it's so important. It keeps you here.
Yeah,
it's so sad when people who aren't successful at the top of their game. That's why winning awards, you can get that day one. IMDb, day one. Sponsorships, day one. People aren't sponsoring old episodes. You don't need to have 1,000 downloads or whatever it is that people are saying that you have to have in the can in the past.
Yeah.
To have a sponsorship about what's going to happen in the future. You're leveraging your brand. Don't leverage your content. If you want to make money from content, focus on syndication and licensing and advertising. But there are better ways to monetize content versus building a media presence and monetizing your brand. You've done it expertly. You've done it expertly.
You are hitting the nail on the head. And it's something I was just going to touch on, is the fact that one of the biggest questions people have is, how can I get sponsors when I don't have 10,000 downloads per episode?
Yeah.
Or like, people freak out when they see the numbers. Like, we are more than our numbers, right?
Yeah,
so how do you do that? You know,
so sad by that. Imagine the difference between having 100,000 overnight followers on TikTok versus having a loyal following of 200 downloads per episode on podcasting. Even if it's like year 4 and 5 and you're even in the low 100s, to those people who are coming back, that's what I mean by the smaller brands have an affinity, a much deeper relationship with our audience. That's why I try to make sure podcasters know they qualify as a creator to be on creator platforms. I also work with creator platforms. I work with Affable.ai. I'm educating them on the power of the podcast audience and how to reach out to them, because they're not identifying as creators or influencers, really, because a lot of those are sort of based on the influence of the brand, the influence of the content. And in podcasting, it's not the influence of the content, it's the consumption of the content that we get paid for because of advertising. So that's where influence and impact for me are at a crossroads when you're trying to make your content grow from your money, from your content. You're trying to make your brand grow from your content, but you're also trying to make your bankroll grow from your content and from the same pieces. Like, I can't imagine wanting 2 number 1 goals from the same person. Right. And they would leave the company, you know, they'd be like, that's too much.
Does that go back?
This is what we do.
Does that go back to the influencer monetization index?
It does.
Like, going through indexes. That, look for people that you might align with. And
so here's what I did. Yeah. And by the way, here's what I did is I picked the top 10 influencer marketing platforms I believe you should be on from personal experience. One of them is FOHR. I got paid 4 digits a month, less than 10, but more than 1. I know the mom's supposed to say, but somewhere in the middle, but literally in the middle, but somewhere in the middle per month for 5 months to get back on Facebook, company page stories when they were just launching stories for company pages. They went back and Facebook hired a platform to find creators on its platform who were no longer active. And they paid us to retrain us to be able to start using stories more on company pages, which meant I got early access to having a company page that had stories. And then people will say, well, then you had to go make all that content. Wait, I'm sorry. I'm a podcaster. I make interviews. Right. I have lots of content that I was ready to upload to there. And I could privately put them in stories, which meant that I didn't have to put them on YouTube, which meant that I'm able to take my interview from I Have a Podcast, the podcast version, which is distributed by LinkedIn Presents, and turn that into a television show called I Have a Podcast on TV, available on DirecTV, Cox, Comcast, and Verizon, courtesy of Bespoke TV. And I make a couple of $100 from advertising there because they have advertisers on that network. I have a licensing deal where I own the content. I'm bringing my guests to television in the context of me. I'm still not on social media. And for $2,000 a month, I buy some FM radio, like terrestrial radio time, either FM or AM, but terrestrial radio. I get a 25-minute show per week. It's the same episode, usually me and Mandy Moore. I don't change the episode because I change the audience. This is like, you're in your car, you're on your way to work or church, wherever you're going, the gym. And it's FM radio, not digital where you have to go find it in the .com world, but there's already a guaranteed audience. I spend a little bit of money on Facebook and Snapchat to geo-target the audience so they know that this conversation is happening on these 4 weeks at this time. I get 2 promos per day from the radio network to push to that spot. And I can bring in maybe $10,000 a month, $2K per show, so maybe $10,000 a month. And I can guarantee the brand what the conversation is because I already have it. I'm just changing the sponsorship, not even the content. I'm changing the context of the content, not the actual core content. I'm not asking Mandy Moore to sit down and do more episodes. I'm doing more with what I do. All of that power of IP. That's the power of owning your content.
And when you say owning your content, does it mean you have to have it trademarked and you have to go through? Because a lot of people are like trademarking their podcasts.
Yes.
Is that necessary?
So, a couple of things. That's a great question. No, because trademarking is actually, so copywriting is something that's strictly in America. Trademarking is a union of predominantly English-speaking countries worldwide that will agree to acknowledge that there's ownership in a territory and that's exclusive to that territory. But there are other countries that don't care what our trademarks are. Also, in doing some research, I realized there's something called a creative mark, which is exactly the same thing as a trademark. Trademarks are for words. Creative marks are for actions. And if you have a unique way of executing something, of doing something, especially creatives who can relate to this, hopefully your ears are tingling. But if you have a creative, unique way of stacking opportunities with each other or technology, that's a creative mark that you can actually license. The answer to your question is, if you're going to leverage media, if you're going to leverage content on multimedia platforms, I recommend that you trademark it so that you own it. For merchandising reasons, for legal reasons, also because it's valuable to have the R on it in television. That's true. You get a little bit of protection depending on what podcast platform you post your episodes from. So if you're on Podbean or something, you have 100% retention of your content. It's all yours. But if you're on Anchor, for example, and because Spotify owns Anchor, so there's some extra rights that Spotify has to your series, which is the big problem with creators that are only publishing content on social media platforms, because all of those platforms also have rights to be able to advertise and utilize the content that you premiere to the world by publishing on their platforms. So the IP changes just a little bit, but when you launch a podcast, the IP is yours. If you have a reality show, if you want to have a reality show, if you think you might have maybe a reality show based on the process of your business, I would recommend creating a podcast. By the way, don't even come out with an episode, just a solid trailer, and take that episode trailer and construct of IP to a production company and license the show. That's the touch point now that people will be able to tell your story, as opposed to what we know is that 50,000 page American Idol deal. And I'll tell you what, housewives of any show on Bravo pay up to 15% of proceeds from those companies if they have product in picture. If they have product in picture, up to 15%. If they launch a show, if they launch a business that's not even talked about in the franchise, but happens during the time of production or airing, then Bravo is still entitled to about 2.5% to 5% of those. So they're finding ways to make money, and owning your IP is a guaranteed way for you to retain rights and I think, out of the gate.
I think mainly that's great information. Thank you. I think a lot of, from the conversations I've had, a lot of podcasters, specifically podcasters, they just want to cover the costs of what it takes to put a podcast out there in the world. You know, that's a big thing, I think.
Yes.
That's the main thing. So like, what is the basics of what's the one thing a podcaster can do if there's somebody starting a podcast, or to just start with a little monetization or sponsoring? I think that's the question I get a lot.
Yeah. All right. So I would say this: you want make sure you have a product that you're selling, a service or a product that you're selling. Mm-hmm. If you're going to launch a podcast, make sure you have so in podcasting, you have something called a pre-roll, a mid-roll, and a post-roll. The post-roll and pre-roll bookend the episodes, and the mid-roll is right in the middle. You kind of can move it wherever you want. You can't skip through them. It's kind of like, good old-fashioned digital TV where you can't skip the commercials, but on broadcast you can. If your first audio ad people should not be able to listen to your content without going through that 30-second ad that pushes people right back to a product or service. So out of the gate, I want to stick with what do you have, right? So what do you have? Hopefully a product or a service. What you need is a quick 30-second ad that you can record and drop in as a dynamic ad, which means every time someone plays your episode, they're forced to hear that very first ad. That's like the first place where I would start, because you hopefully have that, within the construct. The second place is, and that's kind of like decent income. That's your product. So however you priced your product and whatever that sales method is, that's your result. On the small scale, I do affiliate marketing. There's a couple of products that I use that are in every single one of my podcast notes for podcast growth, for podcast reviews, podcast creation, AI creation. I make a couple of $100 now because I've been scaling my appearances on podcasts. I use those links everywhere I go. I'm generous with the information I share. Some of that content that I share are affiliate links. Some of them are not. If there is an affiliate link and model, I usually have a relationship with another entity or platform that benefits from it, which that I'm also really excited about. I think the affiliate model is a great place to start off before I even start talking about newsletters and subscriptions.
I would actually love for us to talk about newsletters and subscriptions, because that's a big thing. I put out a newsletter. How important is that to growing your audience, Vinnie?
Oh, tremendous. I mean, before I even talk about newsletters and subscriptions, the future of visibility, the future of being discovered, and the future of sharing content, I truly believe, comes in the form of subscriptions. There's just too much information and content out there for search to yield the results of high quality in the moments that we need them, for search to yield the results that we want. And also, I mean to be a pessimist, but Google has their own plans with the information. Their goal is not to connect people who are looking for information. Their goal is to give the information to the people who are looking for it. Newsletters, subscriptions, these are things that create a deep connection directly with us, the creators, not just the platforms. And as these platforms are leaning into the creator economy, and they do something called personalization. So everyone's like, oh, I can personalize my experience on the platform. That's, by the way, the algorithm learning your personality traits or my personality traits as a creator. That's you training the algorithm to have an experience on the platform. That's not enabling a deeper relationship with creators. And for that reason, I think newsletters and subscriptions are coming back more so than ever. Email marketing is coming back more so than ever. Instagram and LinkedIn will both tell you that what's happening in the DMs, in the in-mail, there's far more information being shared privately than publicly on these social platforms. So for me, knowing that, I got to lean into something that's going to take my story out of the story world and the story verse, because only the big stories actually survive the test of time. You know, Rumpelstiltskin, the three little pigs, Little Red Riding Hood, like great characters. Those are the stories that stand the test of time. So I'm going to be a source, and being a newsletter allows me to be a source. And that source, especially on LinkedIn, is something that people share before profiles. They will share your source. They will share your resources. They will share your stories. If the construct is tight, way quicker than sharing your own personal profile. It's a great way for growth. And
I do newsletters regularly. In fact, I remember you reaching out to me and you've commented on a few of my newsletters because I make them very personal and funny and engaging. You know, I like to do that. I feel like that's a great way to reach out to people. But how is it translated if I were to take something like that over to LinkedIn? Is that a possibility?
So do you publish your newsletter to the internet after you publish it as an email to people privately?
I have, and I used to do blogs, but I'm going to say the direct answer is no.
Good.
I mean, it has a link. It does have an URL link because it comes through like a MailChimp or you know, Wix or something like that.
Yeah. The reason why I asked that question is LinkedIn.com probably has a higher domain authority than like our websites, by the way. Sure. So if I write the same article from LinkedIn.com as a newsletter that hits SEO in Google and Yahoo and Bing from a LinkedIn.com address versus my own, I could be cannibalizing the audience that's coming to my website, right? So if I'm putting out the same identical form of information, then basically my website and LinkedIn are going to compete for each other. I bet LinkedIn is going to win.
Yeah.
So some people might say, well, that's a great strategy. Let LinkedIn win. And I'm like, well, then make the decision. Don't let the algorithm make the decision. So I love what you said when you said, no, we used to post, we weren't maybe seeing the results on it, maybe. So we sort of pulled back. And like you said, newsletters are private. They're intentionally crafted to be in my hands and similar to a podcast, in my ear. I mean, this is a very trusted space that you're coming into. So I wouldn't recommend taking your exact newsletter that's published on a website into LinkedIn. I would recommend bringing that into ChatGPT and making a tweak where maybe you can be quoted, where the input dictates the output and you are the input, right? We're not asking ChatGPT to come up with AI, to come up with a topic. We're saying, take this conversation that I've had and turn it into a LinkedIn newsletter. Make sure there are call outs to actionable takeaways. And make sure to talk about this from my perspective of my expertise and why my audience knows and trusts me. I would maybe put those prompts in. And the LinkedIn newsletter is a brilliant tool. Unlike MailChimp, it doesn't cost a single penny to have a LinkedIn newsletter, whether you're paying for LinkedIn or not. It hits your Gmail. It hits your InMail. I get an in-app alert. I get an in-feed alert. If you tag me in your newsletter, LinkedIn tells me that I've been mentioned in someone else's newsletter. So LinkedIn is leaning into newsletters the same way that Instagram is leaning into Reels, the same way that YouTube is leaning into Shorts. These are their preferred methods of growth, and it's working. And on LinkedIn, I'm seeing it. I'm seeing the sorcery, the magic of being a resource. And by the way, we get a couple of things out of it, right? One, I'm supporting a cause that I believe in. If I share this, then I'm continuing a cause that I believe in, like-minded people, like-minded actions. That's how I can build audience. How I can build community is simply just by sharing it, because it makes me look good. It makes someone else look good by following it on LinkedIn, a business to business platform where our actions are scrutinized in the context of business on are we who we are, what we say, are we who we are, what we say we are, and do we do what we say we do? Here we have the opportunity to do that and to create content that can serve that purpose, to create content that allows people to share a conversation, a topic in a masterful form, and not to say anything wrong about posts and short form content to content, but that's an exhausting drill. If that's going to be the run, I'll tell you that that's an exhausting drill, because it's the size of the conversation that matters on LinkedIn more so than the size of your audience, right? It's the size of conversation that supports that post. And again, like as I said, more people are sharing newsletters as a source, as a resource, and as education and entertainment way quicker than we are the actual performers and experts themselves.
Love that. That's making me want to readjust, like just adjust and do some things a little differently as I help grow my LinkedIn, because that's an area that's growing a lot, or I call it Linky Dink. Grow my LinkedIn and just share it with a new audience. See, like maybe the audience in my newsletter that sign up for my newsletter, they get the whole enchilada, whereas on LinkedIn, maybe they get a piece and like, go check out this link to read the full thing. It's that art of the tease kind of thing. I love all of this. Vinnie, we could talk for hours. In fact, I think we have. But there's such good information that it's hard to cut it short. And I do want to close and give you back your time. But let's do a quick rapid fire. I love this game. I do it at the end of every podcast. I like to just do something fun. And basically what I've done is I've pulled words from our conversation. I'm just going to throw it out there to you. And I want you to come back with one word that comes to mind. Okay. Just the first word. It's just word association. You got it?
Got it.
Ready?
Oh, yes.
Okay. All right, here we go. One word. Healing.
Intentional.
Media.
Cooperative.
Questions.
I'm going to say point of view, if that can count as one word.
POV.
Yeah. Or I could just say microaggressions.
Okay, perfect. Influencer.
Impact.
Creator.
Collaborator.
Content.
Message.
This is 2 words. Imposter syndrome.
Me.
I love you.
Old me, by the way.
I love you.
Oh, I didn't even know that existed until like my 30s or 40s, y'all. I go to, oh man.
Who did?
But how about journey?
Perfect.
Journey.
Love that. Oh, that's looking forward. That's beautiful. I love that. IP.
Power.
Yeah. And I'm going to say two more. Story.
Sharing.
And podcast.
I'm going to say conversation.
Or I have one.
Yeah, or I have one. That's just trying to
conversation. That's great.
I love
that's
what the podcast, right? My podcast is a conversation about the topics that I want to have a talk about, and oftentimes that's not believing in myself and all those things that we go through in life, and let it be, that's the process.
Let it be a continue place for conversations. Yours, mine, anyone out there that's listening that wants to start a conversation, just press record.
Yeah, have the conversations that we can have. Don't wait to have the conversation. And I appreciate contributing to conversations and additive comments in conversations. But sometimes talking about it for a long time doesn't make it better. Great action comes from difficult conversations. I learned that from a very smart man named Kwame on LinkedIn, who's has a brilliant podcast called Negotiate Anything. And what I learned is true. Like, great actions, great opportunities come from difficult conversations. And the more we can instill that value system in the conversations that we're having, then these debates couldn't be more rewarding, because we're all headed towards a common goal with individual successes.
Beautiful. That is such a great way to end this conversation. I appreciate you. I adore you. And thank you just for being a light and a source of such powerful conversations and creativity and collaboration and all the C words. Good C words.
Right? Yeah. Collaboration. And I've just loved watching you be uniquely yourself. And you've done it way longer than everyone. You were yourself way before being yourself was something that people, even knew was possible. And you've just done it with such grace and refinement. And thank you for another C word, continued conversation, right? It's not about the new topics that we can talk about. It's the way that we can continue to support this. And you've just built a wonderful world for it. So I appreciate you so much.
That means so much to me. And I feel the same. Thanks so much, Vinnie. You're the best.
You are. No, you hang up.
No, you hang up. No, you hang up first. I'm leaving that in.
Thank you.
I love it. That's the best. Oh boy, I hope you are taking notes. But if you are not, have no fear. It is all in the listen notes of the podcast. You can go on over there, check everything out you need to know to get in touch with Vinnie, to get in touch with me. To contact Vinnie, I want you to make sure you tune into his podcast, I Have a Podcast, or even head over to ihaveapodcast.com. It is the #1 source for creative and career inspiration. Plus, you can grab his free growth kit. And let me tell you, I haven't seen anything like this offered with such authenticity, no strings attached. He gives you a lot. And if you're looking to grow, this is the place to go. I go there often, and I hope you will too. If you are still feeling the feels and you find that you are getting in your own way and you want to take things to the next level and you need someone to mirror back at you what you don't see in the moment, let's hug it out. Let's find what's keeping you in the overwhelm and keeping you stuck. Set up a complimentary session with me today to see how havening can help put the power of active emotional well-being back in your hands. And I'll even share more about how you can join me for my Havening happy hours. Those are free and they were monthly. And it's a great source to be kind to your mind in healing, understanding, and gratitude. Oh yeah, we're gonna hug it out. So on that note, I will leave you with this. You have a gift that deserves to be shared, a voice and a story that people are waiting to hear about. Don't waste it, amplify it, and know that I've got your back. I love you, I believe in you, and I will see you next week.
I know the girl with mountains